Hi, thank you so much for joining us today for our Building Community Check-in. I hope you had a wonderful long weekend and that you have had a good start to the week despite the cold, rain, and snow. I'm Sharon Knight from Hope Communities, which is a nonprofit that's been supporting some of the most vulnerable in Denver for over 40 years with housing, educational programs, and support services. We have always been committed to building stronger and more vibrant communities. And when the pandemic started, we knew that we would have to keep that sense of community alive somehow, and it would be more important than ever. So way back in March, we started these shows as a way to bring reliable and timely information about the virus to you, to provide resources on how to get through this very trying time. And also, we just had a sense that people would be more isolated. And so we wanted to let you know that we would be there for you. And we have tried to do that ever since the beginning of the pandemic. We know that many people are watching this video as it's launched, but others watch it later on. And if there are specific things that we talk about today or show today that you think would be helpful for others, please share the link to this video. And if you or anyone else you know needs specific information or resources, you can always email us at info@hopecommunities.org to get information or to get help in any way. There's also lots of resources on our website if you want to check that out, which is hopecommunities.org. So I'd like to talk a little bit about news and current events. And one of the things I want to focus on today is voting. So it's time to start thinking about that now. Voting, of course, is an important civic responsibility that gives you a chance to share your opinion about who and what happens with our government. It should be taken very seriously, and I know that some people are concerned this year about limitations around voting because of the pandemic and also other social pressures. So getting your ballot in order, getting your voter registration information in order is an important first step. So you can review your voter record and make sure that your information is up to date. If you want a mail-in ballot, of course, your address has to be up to date. So if you've moved, please make that change. If you're not currently registered, you can register by October 26th and still receive a mail-in ballot. So the counties are starting to send those out October 9th. So you might see them coming in soon after that. If you do have a problem and you think it's not going to be coming to you or you don't see that it's registered yet, you can reach out to your local county clerk and recorder. One way to check to see if your ballot was mailed is to go to govotecolorado.gov, and you can check to see if it's mailed and see the status of your ballot. So what is the deadline to register? We mentioned an early deadline to register to get a mail-in ballot, but in Colorado, you can actually register to vote and vote in person on election day until 7 p.m. If you got a mail-in ballot, of course, and you go to vote in person, you could only have one vote. So once you have voted in person, the county clerk will not accept any other ballots that were mailed to you. If you do vote in person, you will need ID. All voters who vote in person must provide identification to show that they are valid voters. The common form of IDs that are accepted are the driver's license or the Colorado ID. Those are the most frequently used. But there's lots of other IDs that you could use, such as a passport, a military ID, a copy of a current utility bill, bank statement or paycheck, Medicare or Medicaid cards, birth certificate, student ID, veteran ID, or ID that's issued by a local tribal government. The ID has to show your Colorado address. Well, how do you find a polling location? You can go to that govotecolorado.gov location on the website, and they will show you all of the different places that you can go to vote in person. And if you're waiting for a mail-in ballot instead of doing the in-person and you don't see it, you can ask for a replacement And even if you've made a mistake on your ballot and you want to start again, you can ask for a replacement from the county clerk, or you can vote in person at the voter service and polling center. So you have to make sure that if you're doing this by mail, that you follow the instructions on the mail envelope specifically, which includes the fact that you have to sign. You have to put your signature on that ballot. So in order to be counted, your county clerk must receive your ballot no later than 7 p.m. on election day. So generally the recommendation is to mail your ballot a week ahead of time, but there's been very slow mail lately. And so if you get a mail-in ballot, you may want to act much more swiftly this year. Postmarks do not count. The ballots actually have to be in the hands of the county clerk by 7 p.m. on election day, November 3rd, in order to be counted. So drop boxes are also an option for you to drop that mail-in ballot instead of going through the mail. And there are drop boxes all over the city that are open 24 hours a day. I mentioned the one website through the state already, and then there's also some others that will really drill down into your different counties. So if you are voting for the first time in person, of course, as I said, make sure that you bring your ballot. If you have it, you don't need to use that. You can also leave that at home if you want, but bring your valid ID so that they will count you. You know, people, and I remember the last time that I voted in person, this happened. Sometimes there's huge lines. In Colorado, if you are in a line by 7 p.m., even if you don't get in the door to cast your vote earlier, you will be allowed to finish voting. Anyone who is in that line, no matter how long it takes, will be able to cast his or her ballot. And can you fill in a ballot and not vote on every single thing and still have your vote count? Yes. Whatever races you choose to vote on will be counted. You won't have anything held against you for not filling in all of the dots. So is there ability for accessible voting? Well, of course, the mail-in ballot does help that quite a bit so that people can cast their vote from their own home or another location. But there's also a way when you're in line in person, there is specific ways that people will help people with different disabilities or different limitations to be able to get through the voting process. So hopefully you will take this chance to share your opinion, to have your voice heard in the voting process this year. So again, if you have any questions about this, you can reach out to us. We will be having some kind of voter registration process, or at least information at our tent topics on Wednesdays at Hidden Brook. So if you want to talk to somebody in person, we will forecast when we're going to do that. That should be in the coming weeks. So I like to also give a quote each day. And this one actually is one that just seemed appropriate to me right now. And it is sometimes called the Serenity Prayer. At a time when I'm not ready for the quick change of winter, and there's so many things that have been changing already, and it seems like out of our control, I thought it might be important to share this quote. God, give us the grace to accept the serenity, the things that we cannot change, courage to change the things that should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish between the others. That is by Reinhold Niebuhr. So allow us to accept what we can't change. Give us the courage to accept the things that can be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish one from the other. It is something important during this time, I think, when the pandemic is upon us and there seems like there's so many things we can't change. We're going to just have to accept that. So hopefully that will work for you as much as it has been helpful to me. You know, September is usually a harvest month for many of us. I know this year I had to completely harvest my little garden, yesterday because of the surprise cold snap. So I gathered lots of tomatoes and peppers and onions and herbs, and it's kind of nice and comforting sometime in the fall during harvest time when you do bring those food things in to cook. And so we know that some of the people that we serve who live at Hinnenbrook have their own garden plots, and they're probably also harvesting all of these vegetables. We also know that we are bringing in food on Wednesdays to distribute to families. And so because it's this change of time and fall seems to really be upon us, we are also going to share some cooking videos with you today. Beth Fisher has done it again. She's offering us demonstrations on 2 dishes that look incredibly tasty, and they use those ingredients that I harvested and that we bring to our residents each week. She is going to be showing us how to make stuffed peppers and how to make a chorizo, corn, and bean scramble. She has a knack for these demonstrations, and I know people who have started to cook because of her demonstrations. So please watch her videos and see what you think.
Hello, Hope Communities. This is Beth Fisher, and I'm bringing you another cooking demonstration. Tonight, we're going to make tofu stuffed green peppers. So let me introduce you to the ingredients that we'll be using for this delicious meal. We'll be using 2 green bell peppers, which we will stuff with our tofu mixture. Our tofu mixture is going to be made up of onions, garlic, some fresh herbs, and tomatoes. And what I have here is called harissa sauce. It's a red pepper sauce, but you could use any other kinds of sauce. And then a package of firm tofu. So we're going to cut these things up, saute them and stuff them in our peppers, and then bake the peppers. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is chop up my onion, and I'll put that into a fine dice. I'm going to take the outer layers of the onion off. This one is particularly flaky. Okay, get some of this out of the way and stick that in my compost. And then I'll just simply dice the onion. And I do that by making small slices, about 1/4 inch apart, on the onion in one direction, and then the same, turning it 90 degrees and doing the same on the other direction. This makes it then very easy to dice. So then you turn it on its side like this and just slice down, and what you have then are diced onions. The last little bit, and I just chop that up. Okay. Okay, I'm going to give this a nice dice. Okay, so these are fairly finely diced because they're going to go in with our tofu. We're going to cook the onions and the garlic first. Okay, so those are my onions. I also have a clove of garlic here. I'm going to move my table just a little closer to the camera. Let's see if that looks better. So I have a clove of garlic. Nice big one. I'm going to dice that up very finely as well, and I'll cook that along with the onion. There's my garlic. Again, I'm just going to chop that up very fine. If you have a garlic press, you could use that as well. All right. This is a nice big fat garlic, clove of garlic. Again, just dicing that really fine so it will cook nicely along with the onions. That beeping sound you heard is my oven going off. I've set my oven for 350 degrees because we'll need that to bake our green peppers. Okay, so you can see I have the garlic all nicely diced. Piece that didn't get chopped up. Now just mix that with onion. So I have an onion and garlic dice here. What I'm going to do with this is put it in my saute pan with some olive oil. So this is the pan that I'm using. I'm going to put some olive oil, about a couple teaspoons, you don't need a whole lot. And I'll put that back on the stove over here. Maybe a little bit out of the camera view, but I will show you as it is prepared. And what I'm going to do is just put all of that into the pan with the olive oil so that can be cooking while we prepare some of the other ingredients. Okay, so I have that. The onion and the garlic are in a pan, and I'm just going to saute that over medium-high heat for a while with a little bit of olive oil. While we're doing that, I'm going to get our peppers ready. So these are green peppers I've already washed. I'm going to cut the top off the pepper so that we'll be able to stuff it. Now it's important when cutting the top off to make sure you don't go through the bottom of the pepper because we want to keep it intact. So I've just gone around the top part, removed the top, and then if you can see inside the pepper there's sometimes ribs. I'm going to just use my fingers to kind of pull out some of that flesh. There's actually not too much in this one. You'd want to remove any seeds, but this particular pepper doesn't seem to have many. All right, and I'm going to do the same with this other pepper because we're going to stuff 2 peppers for this recipe. You can obviously adjust this as you need to. So this one had a lot more seeds, and you can see inside there are a number of seeds. So I'm going to just pull those seeds out and just rinse the seeds. That's one of the easiest ways to get rid of seeds in a pepper is just take it over to your sink. So what I have here then are 2 peppers. You can see with the tops cut off, and that's what I'm going to use to stuff the peppers. I'm going to get out these straws. So I'm going to just use a standard kind of loaf pan dish. You can use any dish you want for the peppers, but I'm going to put the peppers in here, and that's how we're going to bake them. Now my onions and garlic are sauteing over in my pan. Just going to give them a little bit of a stir. And I want to get them nice and browned before I add the tofu. All right, they're coming along nicely. I think I will also next prepare my tofu. So what I have is just regular, what is this? This is extra firm tofu. I think you could use any kind of tofu. I just happen to have extra firm. Tofu is a really good food for you. It's full of lots of protein, it's low calorie. I'm going to open it up here over by my sink so I don't make too much of a mess because the liquid spills out. this just to get the tofu out of the container. There we go. So now I have my tofu out of the container. And what I'm going to do is dice it. Ultimately, I'm going to scramble it a bit, but I want to dice it into small pieces right now for cooking. So I'm making slabs about that big, probably 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to slice through it a couple times this way. So I'm really getting a very small dice out of my tofu. The nice thing about extra firm tofu is it's really easy to work with. Okay, and then I'm going to cut it in 1/4 inch pieces. So you can see what's happening here is I'm just getting very small pieces of the tofu. And that will be good for when I saute it. All right, so all my tofu is chopped up. Delicious, but it's even better when it's cooked. Okay, my onions are cooking over here. I have my tofu that I'm going to be putting in with the onions soon. The other thing I want to put in with the onions is some herbs. So I'm fortunate enough to have a little herb garden. So I've just pulled all kinds of herbs from my garden. You can use anything. One thing I've learned with herbs is it's really fun to just mix them all together. So I've got a little bit of parsley and basil and marjoram and thyme. You can just take whatever you happen to have and chop it up. And we're going to add that to our tofu and onion mixture, and that will give some additional flavoring to our stuffing for the green peppers. So with thyme, which is what this is here, I typically will take it like this, and it has a lot of little leaves, and I just run my finger right down the stem, and that takes off the leaves, and then you don't have that woody part that you don't really want to have in your food. So again, just pull off the little bitty leaves. I think this might be marjoram. And then I have some basil and some parsley. Just a whole mishmash of herbs. So generally what I do is just try to remove some of the woody stems because they're not as pleasant. And then I just put it all together into a bunch and chop it up. So these are just a variety of herbs, just chopped up to be a little bit smaller. There, and that will add a nice green color to our tofu mixture as well. Let me go check my onions. Okay, they're looking good. I think we might be ready to add the tofu. Oh, I have one more thing I wanted to add. So I'm going to leave my herbs over here. I also have a tomato, and I thought that might be a good addition to the stuffing. So I'm going to prepare my tomato basically by just coring it and then cutting it into a small dice. I'm not even going to bother peeling it or doing anything with it. Just cutting it into small bits so that I'll add that to my tofu stuffing. They'll both give it some color and additional flavor. This looks like an especially yummy tomato. Okay, so I've got that all chopped up now. So the first thing I'm going to add to my onion mixture is my tofu, because I want that to saute a bit. So I'm going to move the camera a little bit so you can see what I'm doing over at the stove. So this is my onions. Let's see if I can get this positioned in such a way that you'll be able to see what I'm doing. This is what happens when you're your own cameraman, or woman in this case maybe. All right, I think you can see my stove now, and you can see the onions sauteing. So you've seen there they've cooked up nicely. Just starting to get brown. So what I'm going to do is bring my board of ingredients over here, and first of all I'm going to put in the tofu. Remember, the tofu is all diced up, so I'm just going to put in all the diced tofu and mix it up with the onions. And we'll leave that chopping board right there. Okay, so now I have the tofu in here. I'm cooking that, kind of chopping it up as I go along, mixing it nicely with the onions. And we'll just let this similarly cook for a little while. So it's almost like a tofu scramble. And that will make it easy to put in our peppers. I'm just using my spatula here to just continually mince the tofu a little more. Could probably use a fork. Something else. Okay. So you can see by this continual chopping it up with the spatula, it's making it more of like almost like a scrambled egg. The texture of a scrambled egg. So call it kind of a tofu scramble. Now there'll be water that comes out of the tofu a little bit, so we want to cook that down. All right. I'm also going to add a little bit of salt and pepper at this point. So just what, except we had a technical interruption. So I'm adding some pepper to my tofu, and then I'm going to add some salt. This happens to be sea salt, but you can use whatever you have. And again, just a few cranks. That looks like I put a lot of salt in. I actually didn't, because my salt shaker doesn't work very well. Okay. You can see this is kind of cooking down a little bit. I want to try to get some of the moisture out of here, because I'll be adding in a little bit more liquid soon when I add my sauce. Okay, the next thing I think I'll add are my tomatoes. So you can see I have my tomatoes and my herbs right here. So this is probably as good a time as any to put that into the tofu mixture. We'll put both our tomatoes and then all our herbs. You can see it's getting quite colorful. And again, I'm just going to mix all this up. You can basically put whatever ingredients you might think about into this kind of stuffing. Tofu is very versatile. If you don't like tofu, you could also make this recipe with ground beef or ground pork in place of the tofu, and that would also work as a stuffing. Okay, I'm going to let that cook for a bit, and then the last ingredient that I'm going to add, because I have it handy and I really like the taste of it, it's called harissa, and it's a spicy red pepper paste. You can see it's a sort of the consistency of ketchup. So I'm going to put this in, and that will give it yet a little bit more flavor. If you don't have something like harissa, you could think of some other sauces. If you want to give it more of a Asian flavor, a chili garlic sauce would probably be very tasty. Okay, so you can see the harissa turned my tofu a kind of a pale pink color. I'm gonna wish I had just a little bit more, but I have what I have. I'm gonna take a taste of this and see if I like the flavor before we stuff it in our peppers. Pretty good. It's got a nice little spice to it with that harissa. Okay, so you can see this is kind of cooked, and as I say, it looks like a scramble. You could eat it just like this. But what I'm going to do with it is stuff our peppers. So let me see. So you can see I have the peppers, and what I'm going to do is take some of my mixture. I'm going to turn it off now. It's all heated up, so it's already cooked, but we're going to let it cook even longer once we stuff the peppers. We'll let it cook inside the pepper. So I'm going to take a big spoon like this and take my pepper, and I'm just going to scoop this mixture up and plop it right in the pepper. Fill it right up. As much as you can get in there. I kind of even pack it down a little bit. And I'm going to actually drain out some of the juices. And get as much stuffing in there as I possibly can. There we go. So you can see that's all stuffed up. Now I'm going to do that with my other pepper. And put all my filling in. I'll probably have a little more filling than I need for just 2 peppers. This would probably be enough for 4 peppers. Again, just draining it a little bit as I stuff it. Because the peppers, as they bake, will add some moisture to the stuffing as well. Be a little bit careful because it can be hot, I just discovered. Ooh, very hot. Okay, so I'm going to put that pepper in there and go answer the phone so we don't need to listen to it. Hello? Hey, can I give you a quick call back? Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm back. So you can see we have our peppers that are stuffed. I'm going to put these in the oven at 350. I'm thinking I might want to just put a tiny little bit of water in the bottom of my pan. And that might, I'm not sure if it's even necessary, but it might help the peppers from sticking in a funny way. So all I did was I just covered the base of the pan with just a very small amount of water. And now I'm going to put these in the oven uncovered and bake them. As I said, I'm baking them at 350 degrees. So I will let you know how long they bake once they're done. And we'll taste them and hope they taste delicious. So see you in a bit. Hi everyone, we're back. Our green peppers stuffed with tofu are baking away. They've baked for about 30 minutes and I think they're ready to come out of the oven. So I'm gonna pull them out and show you what they look like. There you go. So you can see the green peppers have gotten soft. I still like them somewhat firm. And then the tofu has just browned a bit on top. So you can take these out and put them on a plate and you will have yourself some dinner. They're very hot, so when you take them out, you just need to be very careful. Okay. So there we have our tofu stuffed green pepper. I hope you enjoy it. Hello, welcome to another session of cooking with food that you get from the food pantry or can get readily available. Today I'm going to show you a bean and corn and sausage scramble. It's very easy to make and results in a delicious meal, and uses some of the ingredients that you may have gotten in your most recent food pickup or things that are in season now. So let me just explain some of the items that are going to go in the dish and then I'll show you how to go about making it. We're going to be using some green onions, and if you like food a little spicy like I do, we're going to use a jalapeno. I'm going to use corn. I actually have some fresh corn that I'm going to cut off the cob, but you can use canned or frozen corn if you want. I also have a tomato that I'm going to use, and then pinto beans. In my case, I'm using canned pinto beans, but I know that you might have dried pinto beans, and those are perfectly fine for this recipe as well. You just want to soak them overnight and cook them before using them in the recipe. And then our other ingredient is chorizo, which is a spicy sausage, Mexican sausage, so we'll be using that as well. So I'm going to start by chopping up and prepping some of the vegetables that I'll be using in the scramble. So let's get going. First thing I'm going to do is take the corn and remove the kernels. I need to get a bowl. To put the kernels in. It's very easy to just cut the kernels off the corn. I actually have one of these funny little kitchen gadgets that peels the kernels right off the cob very easily. But you can also just use a knife for this. And corn is in season now in Colorado, and your grocery, you can get it very inexpensively and some delicious corn. So I'm going to do 2 ears of corn for this recipe. Just quickly taking it off the cob. And as I mentioned, you could easily use frozen corn or canned corn as well. Let me just remove all the silk from the corn because you don't really want that in your recipe. Last corn off the cob. All right. So we pretty much have our corn prepared. You can see that just here, and we're going to be using that later in sauteing the corn. The other thing I'm going to prepare is the jalapeno and my green onions, and I'm going to do that so that we can be sauteing them. So with the jalapenos, I just cut them and then typically remove the seeds, which has a lot of heat in them, so that's a little bit hotter than I would like to include the seeds. So I always cut out the seeds of the jalapenos. Again, you could use whatever pepper you might have, if you have a cilantro or Fresno peppers work as well, just to give it a little bit of spice. But I know in working at the food distribution this week, many of you got lots of nice jalapenos, so just chopping those up fine, and I'll be putting them in our mix once we start putting everything all together. Okay, and then I also have green onions, and I'm going to just trim the tops off of this part off the green onion, discard that, and then dice them into just little circles so that they're easy to saute along with the jalapeno. So I'm just using mostly the whites of the green onions. And just chopping those up a bit so I have just some small pieces. And I'll put those with the jalapenos. All this will end up going in my compost. So we have our vegetables prepared. We'll use the cilantro and the tomatoes in a little bit. But I think what I want to start doing now is cooking the chorizo. So I've got a pan over on my stove, and we're going to saute the chorizo until it's cooked, and then we'll add some of these vegetables in as well. So I'll go ahead and shift the camera over where we'll be able to see the chorizo cooking. As you can see here, I just have a frying pan. See if I can adjust my camera angle so you can see this a little better. There we go. So I'm going to turn my burner on, kind of medium-high heat. going to put just a touch of oil in the pan just to keep things from sticking. It's probably not even necessary, but just a little bit. And then I'm going to take, so I said this is pork chorizo sausage, but you could use any sausage. I like chorizo because it's has a nice flavor to it. You could use Italian sweet sausage or any kind of loose sausage that you can grind up. You could also, if you wanted to, use ground beef or ground pork, though it might not be quite as flavorful. So I'm just taking the sausage out of the package, and I'm going to let that saute for a bit until it's cooked through. So I'll break it up in the pan so it can cook. So we're just going to let that saute for a little while until it browns. Seems to be taking a little while for my pan to heat up here. But once it's hot, it shouldn't take very long for it to cook. Chorizo lets off a kind of a bright orange-red oil once it cooks. And what we'll do is drain that a little bit. As you can see now, it's starting to cook and saute. There, now you hear the sizzle. The pan is heated up. And there's a wonderful smell that comes off of this. So I'm going to cook this until it's pretty dry. You're going to just be a little careful with the temperature, because once that oil starts, it can splatter a bit. You want to be careful you're not burning yourself. And you can see that it's letting off. It has a fair amount of oil in the sausage that we want to just kind of cook out. Chorizo is very finely ground. So it has a different consistency than hamburger, for example. It's much finer than that. I'm just going to let that cook for another couple of minutes to kind of cook off some of the oil, because I don't really want all that oil in my food. if you can see this, but there's a fair amount of oil that's coming off. I'm going to pour it out because, as I say, I don't really want that. I'm just going to get a bowl and put it in there, and then once the oil congeals, I'll be able to scoop it out and throw it away. But you don't ever want to put oil like this down your drain, or you'll end up with a big clog. So I'm looking for something to strain it with, and I can't find my cup. All right, we'll see how this works. I'm going to just take it, and I've got the oil off to the side, and just going to pour it out while holding the sausage in place, just to drain off some of this oil. It's a little tricky because you don't want to have the meat spill. You just want the oil out. And I usually have a strainer that helps do this, but I can't find it. All right. So I've gotten a lot of the oil out. You can see that. And now there's still a fair amount of oil, but now it's enough to start cooking some of the other things we want to add to it. So I'm going back here to where we got our jalapenos and our green onions. I'm going to throw that in to the mix. And then I'm also going to take my corn and put that in as well. So now we're just starting to put everything in with the chorizo and letting it cook in that along with the chorizo. So all my vegetables are kind of cooking along with the sausage, and there's enough oil, but not too much oil in the pan from the chorizo. That then gives flavor to the vegetables. You can see I'm just kind of chopping that up like that. See what that looks like? It's kind of a scramble. So I've got my jalapenos, my green onions, and my corn in here. And I'm just going to let that cook for a little bit. Get the corn nice and tender, the jalapenos and the onions. And soon I'm going to add the beans. So if you have beans prepared, you could be adding them at this point. I have to open up my can of pinto beans. Again, I'm using pintos, but you could use other types of beans for this recipe depending on what you have at hand. So here is my can of pinto beans. I'm just going to dump all that in. Again, mix it up. So I have quite a little fry going here. If you can see this. So it's the beans, corn, chorizo, jalapenos, and onions. All right, well that's continuing to cook. I'm going to shift back over to our workspace here and just prepare some of the things that we'll use to put on as toppings on our scramble. So what I want to do with toppings is just to chop up some tomatoes and cilantro, and we'll use that as topping for the sausage and bean and corn mixture. I don't really have a name for this dish. I think we need to come up with a name. So I'm just dicing my tomatoes. And the reason I'm going to put them on as a topping as opposed to putting them actually in the mix there to cook is because fresh tomatoes, especially right now in Colorado, are so delicious. And you get more of their flavor when they're fresh than if you cook them. But you could, if you prefer, just put the tomatoes right in with the other ingredients in the pan. Alright, so I'm chopping up my tomatoes. See, they're chopped up, and the other thing I'm going to add then is cilantro. And also use this as fresh cilantro to be more of a topping rather than putting it in the sausage itself. Okay. So I've chopped cilantro, chopped tomatoes. I think we're about ready to plate this all up and enjoy it. So I think I'll use a bowl to serve this in. I'm going to come over here. So this is what we were cooking on the stove. You can see, get it nice and close. You can see that everything is pretty sauteed and well cooked. I'm just going to take some of this, put it in my bowl. Like so. You could also probably serve this on a plate if you prefer. So I have it in a bowl. I'm going to throw some tomatoes on top and some chopped cilantro. I'll bring that over here for you to see. So there is our quick and easy dinner, and I hope you enjoy it. Let me know how yours turns out. Thank you.
These look delicious, and I can't wait to try them myself. As part of every Facebook event, we have been sharing a book review because we know that people are reading a lot more books now. So we have reviewers from the community who provide insight on books that they enjoy because we want you to have some good reading lists to pull from. We try to have our books be available in the library and downloadable if possible for the greatest ease for you to access the books. Today, the book review is offered to us by Scott Bemis. He is reviewing The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. In case you don't know, Gary Keller is the chairman of the board and co-founder of Keller Williams Realty, which holds the #1 position as the largest real estate company in the world. His New York Times best-selling books have sold more than 2 million copies. Jay Papasan is a former editor at HarperCollins Publishers in New York, and he co-authors this book. He is currently the vice president of publishing at Keller Williams. People who read this book, The One Thing, are using the simple and powerful concept to focus on what matters most in their personal and their work lives by focusing their energy on the one thing at a time that will bring them a more rewarding life. And that could be related to the career, strengthening finances, losing weight, getting in shape, deepening faith, whatever is the most important thing to you. So these strategies could help you to achieve your dreams. This book is available at the Denver Public Library, but it doesn't appear to be an option for download right now. Of course, the Denver Public Library still has curbside pickup, so you could order it online and then pick it up in person if you want a hard copy to read through. There are other options, of course, ordering it online, but that would be your free option. Please watch Scott's review. I so appreciate the fact that he has done this for us, and I think you'll find what he has to say really interesting. That review will be uploaded in just a few minutes. That's it for our show today. We will be back on Tuesday, and I hope you'll join us then. Please be well, make smart choices. Let's keep this pandemic at bay. And if, again, you have any questions or you need help from us, please email us at info@hopecommunities.org. Bye now.